Friday afternoon, or Good Friday evening. It's pretty much Friday evening, late afternoon for everybody, at least in the U.S. Other places, I don't even know where it would be if you're watching this from the live feed and the shorts feed. So that's why I do these this way. But yeah, welcome to another Drive Time Dialectic. I'm TC, this is MBRR Media. And we're going to have a very serious conversation here in a few minutes. We're going to get some of the ancillary crowd build waiting thing out of the way. And we're going to talk a little bit about all of my appreciation for all of the channel members, the channel support, all the subscribers. But a big shout out to all the channel members that I have. Always looking for more, but those that I do have, I'm very thankful for. I appreciate everything that you guys do. Big shout out to my show producers. They have an anonymous. She's been very, very generous in giving to the show, giving to the platform. And I'm very thankful for that from her. And a big shout out to IMAV, who is my other remaining show producer level supporter. So if you're wanting to help out, you can hit that join button down below and become a channel member and pick any level of support. But if you pick the top tier of support, you will become a credited show producer, and I will gladly give you a shout out for that, unless you just absolutely insist that I not. But hey, that's one of the perks. You get some name recognition from my tiny little channel. And IMAV is a show producer. Hi guys, show producer from over on Subscribestar. So if you want to go through Subscribestar instead of YouTube and Google, and I think a lot of people prefer that, you can go over Subscribestar and join there. I'm thinking about starting a Patreon as well. Some people prefer Patreon and they already have accounts up there, so we will be exploring that idea. And I'm even thinking about launching Buy Me a Coffee for some people who want to avoid super chats. And speaking of which, super chats are great, especially if you have a question that you want me to see, especially during a Drive Time Dialectic or during a TC Walk and Talk. Another one of the series that I do where I go out and do man on the street interviews at protests and rallies and other events. But yeah, super chats are great, gifts are wonderful, and I'm very thankful for all of them, any of them that you want to send my way to help support what I do. So I wanted to talk a little bit about law enforcement and the rising police state. And lest you think this is going to be a tirade on the left, where I'm just going to attack the left for their use of the police, the rising police state. A lot of people make that assumption that the leftists are the worst when it comes to the police state. I don't hold to that, but let's be honest, the left loves, as much as people think that the leftists hate law enforcement, hate the police, the left loves to use the authority of law enforcement to enact their policies, enact their agenda. Think about, I'm a Second Amendment absolutist. I don't believe there should be any kind of restriction on firearms ownership or the ability to purchase firearms. When you look at the intent of the Second Amendment, it was absolutely to have the citizenry armed in the same way that government was armed. And yet here we sit, government is far better armed than the citizenry, which makes it very difficult to fight against tyranny, which is a really good segue into the rest of this conversation. So, but yeah, the left will gladly use law enforcement to disarm you. They love gun control measures. They love to use the law enforcement to do things like red flag seizures, which I'm absolutely opposed to. I do not believe that red flag laws should exist at all for any reason. The idea that red flag laws are going to stop anybody, and the argument is, well, what if somebody's in a self-harm situation? The red flag law is not going to stop self-harm. Red flag law is not going to stop somebody from hurting a loved one, a family member, or a neighbor. And a person who is planning some sort of major event with a firearm is probably not going to be on the radar of someone who's going to report them. And as we've learned with a lot of the big events involving firearms. Oh, that's great. Thanks. I look forward to that. Thanks, Wally. It'll make for great content when they pull me over. Do you know my location? You're on my gaydar. That's great. Love that. But when you look at red flag laws, they're really not designed to do anything other than to strip people of their due process. And there's a lot of arguments out there. Well, you get your due process after they've taken your firearms without warrants. Yes, absolutely. I will be standing my ground. And I will be castle doctrining as well. It's a chess move. You really gotta know how to do it. But they will seize your weapons without a warrant, without due process, without ever going in front of a judge. All they really need is someone who's close to you or a medical professional to claim you're a threat to self or others, and you're done. And the people who normally go out and do some of these mass events are already on the radar of the FBI, and the FBI doesn't do anything at all to stop those mass events from happening. In fact, a lot of times they aid and abet those mass events, as in, well, never mind. We're not going to go down that road right now. But the right has this reputation. Well, the right likes to advance this reputation that the right is on your side, right? They want you to know that over here, us GOPers, us Trump voters, we're pro Second Amendment, and we are not interested in doing anything to increase the police state. Exactly, Steve. If a phone call can take away your rights, you don't have any. Precisely. You don't have rights, then you just have permission. The Trump modders, the right, the marginal right, what I refer to as the normicons, they all love to tell you that they're pro 2A, but a vast majority of people on the right are all in favor of red flag laws. They're all in favor of red flag legislation. And we're seeing a lot of this play out now with it being argued. The Trump administration is arguing against people who use marijuana on a regular basis having firearms. They don't want anybody that uses marijuana recreationally or in any way on a regular basis to be able to own firearms. Just not carry firearms, own firearms. That's the Trump admin. The Trump administration wants anybody who identifies, or they floated the idea that they want anybody who identifies as trans to not be able to own firearms or purchase firearms. Those are infringements, folks. They're absolutely infringements. So they need a strong authoritarian law enforcement world behind them. All of them. The left, the Dems, what you guys call a lot of you call the Democrats, the leftist progressive Democrats need a very strong law enforcement career field, industry, if you will. And the Republicans need a very strong law enforcement career field. And their arguments on both sides is always about, it's all for your safety. It's all for the well-being of the public. It's to create law and order. It's to prevent chaos. It's to prevent anarchy, which, by the way, we're going to have a very long conversation about what anarchy really is versus what government tells you anarchy is. Want you to believe that anarchy is a bunch of lawless people running around burning down buildings, and that's not anarchy, folks. That is lawless criminality, and anarchy is not lawless criminality. But anyway, that aside, hello everybody who's in the chat. I can't see everybody. I'm seeing a few questions. Once again, if you have a question, you want to offer support, super chat or a super sticker is a great way to do that. I definitely, it's easier to see super chats if somebody has a question, a legitimate question. And if you have an illegitimate question, you want me to read it out loud, a super chat of at least $5 or more will get that done. Now, what we have to wrestle with is that since 2020 especially, we have been dealing with a rising police state. The reality on that is that the right really got bent out of shape and started down a path where they were calling out law enforcement for taking part in the police state during 2020 as law enforcement was expected to enforce the COOF pandemic protocols. They started to question, why is law enforcement not refusing to shut down businesses? Why is law enforcement not refusing to enforce mask mandates? Why is law enforcement agreeing to trespass people for not wearing masks, and on and on and on? So the right started to kind of shift a little, but they walked that back, and then they reserved their hate for the law enforcement community for only the FBI, who they saw as being responsible for, going after their boy Trump and creating January 6th and on and on and on. But they quickly walked all that back, especially when Trump took office in January of this year. All of a sudden now, everybody trusts the FBI, everybody trusts their local law enforcement agencies, everybody trusts all the people on the right are back to trusting cops. And on and just over and over and over, these people are absolutely in love with law enforcement again. Now, there are some exceptions. There are a few more people a little bit more involved or interested in libertarian philosophy, libertarian thought, who are asking some serious questions. They're really starting to say, like, wait a minute, I've got some major concerns. And we're starting to see some of that arise over the use of the Alien Enemies Act, which, by the way, Trump is absolutely misusing the Alien Enemies Act. The Alien Enemies Act is literally meant to be used to deal with foreign nationals who are part of a nation that the United States is actively enmeshed in war with. Well, we're not actively enmeshed in war with any country right now. And simply saying I'm declaring a war on drug traffickers or narco-terrorism, we're now declaring them terrorists. So narcotics runners are now being declared terrorists. And since we've had a global war on terror, we're now calling them terrorists. So therefore, we're going to use the Alien Enemies Act. That's not how the Alien Enemies Act was written. It was not how it was intended to be used. And I'm going to get there. All right. Like it's the only time it's ever been interpreted that way. And we've also seen that Trump's wanting to use the Insurrection Act on a level that he hasn't quite gone there yet, but it's coming. It's rising. He just recently won a court case where the circuit judge, or not, yeah, which circuit? I can't remember which circuit or which district it was. Said, yes, you may deploy troops to Portland. So Trump wanted to deploy the 82nd Airborne to Portland, by the way, and his military advisors are like, Mr. President, bad move. I would not do that right now. That would not look good. Why are you not against anyone illegal? Well, first of all, Cliff, that's you're lucky I saw that. If you really want me to answer it, we'll try and get there, but that's not the point of the stream. Trump is building off of years of conditioning, where we have been told, that we have been convinced by the machine to trust the government, especially trust anything the government says is good for you. And so here's where I'm okay with the use of National Guard. If you want to put the National Guard on federal property, protecting federal buildings and only federal buildings, fine with that. I'm absolutely 100% fine with that. That's a great use of the National Guard. That would even be a great use of active duty military. To put them on the ground on federal property and protect it from harm. But much of what the Insurrection Act will allow will be allowing the use of law enforcement or of the military to conduct law enforcement sweeps, not just to protect agents, not just to protect property, but to actually do law enforcement style activities. And a lot of what has allowed that to creep into our society today has been this overreaching, overwrought conditioning, where we have been told if the federal government wants to do it, it's A-okay and absolutely fine. And everybody should be well on board with that. And I'm here to tell you that it is not okay. That it's bad enough that law enforcement has been militarized, and that militarization goes back to the early 70s, going back to Daryl Gates, former police chief of the Los Angeles Police Department, who was the originator of the concept of SWAT, what most places now call emergency response units. So the militarization of law enforcement has been happening for 50 years. And it's been this creeping doom where they're conditioning us to get more and more used to and comfortable with seeing cops rigged like they're in combat zones. And you see that now. Like, cops in almost every agency get out of their squad cars, whether it's for a traffic stop or a call for a trespassing or, a well-being check or a welfare check on somebody. And this just happened in Montana just a few years back. A very good example. A young man, his girlfriend broke up with him. She placed a call to law enforcement saying you should go do a well-being check. And on him, a welfare check on him. They showed up, they entered his home without a warrant, and ended up shooting him during a welfare check. Now, that's just a form of swatting. But these cops are showing up fully kitted, like they're coming off the streets of Baghdad, like they're coming out of Kabul, Afghanistan. Like they're coming from the Helmand province, and all of a sudden, like, everybody's like, "Hey, that's what they have to. They have to be like that. They have to be better armed than the gangs. They have to be better armed than the criminals." And no, that they shouldn't be. Law enforcement should not be armed better than your average civilian, your other average civilians. The government at no level should have access to better arms and equipment than the average civilian walking around. And a lot of people think that's a really radical position. But when you start to see local municipal law enforcement, county law enforcement, what some people refer to as sheriff's offices, by the way, we can have a debate about sheriff's office or sheriff's department. But anyway, that's a conversation for a different stream. You can have these conversations, but sheriffs, local small town municipal police departments, sheriff's offices, big cities, state law enforcement, everybody's starting to look like they're going into combat, like into a combat zone. And you're literally walking around with soldiers, and sometimes you're walking around with people who are literally straight out of combat zones. What people do not understand is the pipeline of military combat veterans to law enforcement is incredibly profuse. There is a massive amount of people who go straight from combat zones, get out of the military, go straight into law enforcement. There's no waiting period, there's no nothing. They go right into it. And so these people are equipped emotionally and mentally and psychologically damaged sometimes to be willing to shoot anybody that looks like a threat. And you want to go and you want to put them in a militarized law enforcement capacity in a local law enforcement agency, strap them up, kit them up, put them in a squad car, and tell them, go out there and stop crime. And now with the rising number of agencies that have body cams, thankfully, there should be no agency in the United States that doesn't have body cams, by the way. At all. There should be no agency in the United States that is tasked with law enforcement at any level, federal level, state level, county level, municipal level. Every single person who is tasked with enforcing law should be wearing a body cam at all times, no matter what. And we are, thankfully, once again, we're starting to see more and more video come out where cops on camera are willfully beating the crap out of people in violation of their civil rights. Willfully doing that, knowing that they're doing it, forgetting that they're on camera many times, and they're so used to getting away with it that they think that body camera, they're still going to be exonerated. And that should make us ask the question, like, before the body cams, how much more were they doing? So not only oh, Torrin, if you only knew who you were talking to. Oh, jeez. The vast majority of this is all happening because, one, of conditioning. We've been conditioned to be subservient to the state, to government. No, Torrin, you have no idea who you're talking to. You've been conditioned to be subservient to government. And you've been conditioned to be subservient to everybody, every single person who is a government employee, but especially a government employee who has a badge and a gun and authority. And so when you see these militarized cops walking, getting out of their squads, fully kitted out like they're in combat zones, it doesn't bother you. So that makes the next step, which is going to be the mass deployment of troops in law enforcement capacity across the U.S. That's going to make you very comfortable with that. That's going to make you say, hey, I got no problem with it. And, as a friend of mine pointed out today, there was a criminal who was ramming a fence, I believe, at an ICE facility or some sort of government facility today, and that person, was a criminal. They weren't a protester; they were a criminal, and there's a massive difference between a criminal and riotous activity and a peaceful protest. And this friend said, this is going to give Trump what he needs to authorize sending troops in. Now, he and I are on different sides of this issue. He's all for what Trump wants to do. I'm not. And what I'm hearing from a lot of people is, well, the courts have said Trump can do this. Another example where we're getting very conditioned to be, stopped at military-style checkpoints is with ICE. Oh, that's funny, Raymond. We're being conditioned to be run through these militarized-style checkpoints where Customs and Border Patrol and ICE, according to the courts, are allowed to set up these checkpoints within 100 miles of the U.S. border to include not physical, but land borders and coastal lines. And within 100 miles of that, they can set up, according to the U.S. Supreme Court, they can set up these checkpoints, these static checkpoints, and without probable cause, stop you and search you, or not search you, but, well, yeah, they can actually conduct warrantless searches too. They can stop you and force you to identify yourself and prove your citizenship. And that's ICE and Customs and Border Patrol. And now they're actually trying to implement that same level of interference into daily life by taking these and doing more roving checkpoints within 100 miles of the border, and now also in places like Chicago. And the Supreme Court has said, look, roving checkpoints, are roving patrols within 100 miles of the border, we're gonna allow that, but we're gonna put more restrictions on that than just these static checkpoints, because now you're out looking for people as opposed to just stopping cars that are coming through the checkpoints. Now you're out looking and tangibly stopping these cars, and you had better have more than this person doesn't look like an American. And the reality is that the Supreme Court, when you read those decisions, has said, no, look, you had better have reasonable articulable suspicion, and you had better have probable cause for arrest after that arrest about what crime you think this person has committed. So if you think that this person has committed a crime and you're doing a roving patrol for illegals, you would better, you can't just look at this person and go, this person looks illegal, so we're going to stop them. You would better be able to articulate what your reasonable suspicion was of the crime that they committed. Because just saying, I think this person might be here illegally, is not enough to stop that vehicle. That's the Supreme Court's statement. And so we're seeing this ramp up with federal law enforcement. We're seeing this ramp up with the deployment of troops into urban centers, which honestly, they're violent, no argument. Urban centers are definitely more violent. We see this ramping up. We're seeing this call. We're seeing this from the right wing right now, which a few years ago was really pissed off that they were about heavy-handed policing during COVID. Just keep that in mind. Right wing, which, by the way, I protested against that, and I called that out then. The right wing, the Trump bots, the normicons were losing their crap during COVID. They were losing their shit during COVID that cops were enforcing these unconstitutional stay-at-home orders and enforcing the restrictions on traveling. There were states that wouldn't let you, there were places they were talking about not letting you come into the state or leave the state if you, during COVID. Mask mandates. The right was losing their shit over mask mandates, that law enforcement was willing to go in and trespass people from businesses when governors and mayors were implementing mandatory masking in public places. The right was losing their shit about cops being willing to enforce that. The right lost their shit when they watched cops arrest a mother in a playground in Idaho outside for going into a public park. The right rightfully lost their shit. The right lost their shit when law enforcement arrested a guy for paddleboarding in the ocean in California on a closed beach. They lost their shit, rightfully so. I had a friend. The right lost their shit when she was thrown and imprisoned for keeping her business open against the governor's orders, and law enforcement took part in that. But now the right is all on board with law enforcement and the military taking part in patrolling and stopping people randomly. They're telling people, look, the courts have said it's okay. The courts have all said it's perfectly fine. And if you don't have anything to fear, this is coming from the right, from Trump bots, from MAGA people. If you don't have anything to fear, if you don't have anything to hide, why not just prove that you're a citizen? Just carry your papers. I've had people tell me that. Just keep your papers on you. Just keep your birth certificate on you. Keep your ID on you. And then you don't have anything to worry about. Folks, the idea that you could be walking down the street and, like in Chicago, and be perfectly, you're not committing any crime, and National Guard troops or anybody else can just approach you and demand your papers to prove that you are from there, that you were born here. That is so antithetical to what it means to be an American that it should piss off anybody who served in the military and swore an oath to keep and defend the Constitution and the Republic. That antithetical. And just because SCOTUS and just the Supreme Court of the United States or some other court says we don't have a problem with this doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it right. It might be legal, but it's not right. And we're at a place now, folks, where a lot of people, I don't care who you are, there are massive amounts of people who are saying things like, well, it's legal, so it's okay. Like, folks, we should not be okay with anybody being stopped and required to produce identification for nothing more than we want to make sure you're not illegal. And if your argument is we're looking for illegals, how do you know what an illegal person looks like? What's an illegal look like in the United States? Go ahead, I dare you. I freaking fucking dare you to tell me how you identify an illegal in the United States. Just walking down the street. Getting the National Guard and maybe even active duty military involved in this, Coast Guard involved in this. What's it look like? What's it look like? Go ahead, say it. Put it in the chat. What does an illegal look like in the United States? You tell me. How do you know an illegal when you see one? No, you should not be investigated just for looking illegal. Because what does an illegal person look like? Go ahead, tell me. Tell me. What does an illegal look like in the United States? For everybody that's A-okay with them just stopping everybody that looks illegal, what do they look like in the United States if they're here illegally? Is there a particular style of dress? Oh, there it is. There it is. Brown with a Latino accent. At least somebody's willing to admit their racism. Torin, how does it identify? Because the Supreme Court has ruled in other places that requiring somebody to identify themselves in such a way is actually a violation of the Fourth Amendment. There should be no law requiring that people have to carry any form of ID. None. Other than traveling on a roadway in a vehicle that requires licensing. Michael Gillerin. Hey, thanks for the super chat, by the way. I appreciate that. Could Democratic governors and mayors help ratchet down the situation by allowing local law enforcement to cooperate with ICE? Well, here, let me state this without any equivocation. I absolutely, foundationally, fundamentally believe that it should be up to every local municipality and every local county and every local agency as to whether or not they will cooperate with ICE. Absolutely, that's a decision that should be made at the local level. 100% back the local level making that decision. What I do not back, in which the courts have backed me up on, and this is why I have this view, it's called the doctrine of non-commandeering. Look it up if you don't know what it is, the doctrine of non-commandeering. In other words, the federal government cannot require, nor can the federal government insist that any local agency from the municipal level, county level, or state level be required to participate in law enforcement activities for federal crimes or federal policies at their either through manpower or at their own expense. So, if a law enforcement agency cannot be required to take part in federal law enforcement activities, which the courts have ruled that's called commandeering, and they've established the doctrine of non-commandeering. Non-commandeering is primary, it is supreme to any other thing. Then it's a local decision, and I'm 100% on board with those local agencies. Could Democrat governors or even like left-leaning Republicans, could they prevent some of this trouble that we're seeing take place, the struggle take place? Absolutely, they could, if they encouraged legal compliance with and lawful compliance with law enforcement at the federal level, and said, hey, we will assist you in as much as what you're doing is not a violation of people's rights. And the problem that I think we're seeing a lot of people have is that there are people who are legally here, not just legally here, there are people who are born and raised in the United States, born and raised American citizens. And they have lost, they are not lost, they have been stopped and forced to prove that they are American. And that is a problem for a lot of people. I don't know what happened to my chat. I can't see you guys anymore. So, there's people asking questions. I'm sorry, I can't see you. So in truth, in reality, non-commandeering applies. I would encourage Democrats to, Democrat, left-leaning, leftist progressives to get on board and say, hey, let's come together, let's cooperate, let's agree, we're going to come to this, we're going to approach this in a way where we're doing everything we can to ensure due process, because we are going to have to, and this is the key. This is what's missing from a lot of these people. We should be assuming that every single person that we see on the streets of the United States is actually an American citizen. I absolutely 100% say that. I do not look at my fellow people walking down the street, driving down the road, and assume that they're not an American. I assume they're American. I assume that they're here legally. And that's how every single person that you see in the United States should be approached. You should approach every single person not as if they're a criminal, but as if they're illegal, as if they are here legally, or that they are actual born and raised citizens, not just naturalized, but born and raised citizens, regardless of their skin tone, regardless of their accent. And if we can't do that, then we should stop every single person in the United States. Every single person in the United States, as they're traveling, should be subject to being stopped to have their citizenship checked, no matter where they are. 100 miles from the border, or in the middle of downtown Stewartville, Minnesota, or Red Oak, Iowa, or Denton, Texas, whatever, you name it, wherever you are, you should be subject to being stopped. I should have agents in every single county of the United States. They should be out patrolling, and they should be out performing traffic stops for nothing more than to check the identification and citizenship of every single person. And here's why. Because like I said, I believe we should be erring on the side of believing that every single person that we see is legal, that every single person that we see is an American. And the benefit of the doubt should be on their side. Every single one of those situations. And it should be the task of law enforcement to investigate that person that they believe is here illegally, find out what they can about that person before they stop them, and say, okay, we have like, here we are, we're presenting you with information, we're hauling you in for an investigation. or to complete this investigation. But right now, the way it stands, every single person in the United States should actually be afraid that they could be snatched up. Because, and here's the kicker. For all of you really hardcore back to blue types, back to blue at no cost. All of you, I'm sure, if you're tuning into this channel, even as you scroll by, almost everybody's heard about the illegal Monrovian, who, by the way, that's a white guy from Europe. An illegal alien from Europe was holding a job in Illinois as a law enforcement officer. They let an illegal have that job. They didn't complete a background check, a sufficient one. They didn't do a great job on screening him. They didn't do enough work in determining that he was qualified for the job. They let an illegal European man have a job. Now, props to ICE, they arrested him. Give them credit for that. But there are whites, there are Europeans, there are Western Asian types who are white, who are Caucasian, who are here illegally. But we see people demanding that we go after brown skin, Latino looking, Latino accented people. And I'd say if you're gonna go after anybody, you target everybody. And law enforcement should not get the benefit of the doubt. They are government. Government should never get the benefit of the doubt. Ever. Never, ever give the benefit of the doubt to government. Never trust that what government is doing is right. That the government is getting it right, that they're nailing it, that it's correct. Ever. Never trust that. Never believe for a minute that the government has your best interests at heart. And until they're willing to treat all of us equally, their hands should be greatly tied. Greatly tied. And I mean that. And like, if somebody were to pull up behind me, let's say, I live in southeast Minnesota. I'm nowhere near the 100-mile buffer that they allow ICE and Customs and Border Patrol. But I will gladly fight that case if need be. I will not agree to ever identify myself and prove that I am an American. I won't. I will not take part in their investigation. If they want to hold me, let them hold me. I'll fight that case. And like that's the whole point of the stream too, by the way, is to say, like, just because someone says, hey, the courts have declared that this is legal, doesn't make it right. There's a lot of stuff that's legal that's not right. And it's a cliche to say slavery was once legal in the United States. It was. It was never right, but it was legal. It was once legal to inter every single Japanese person in the United States that they could get their hands on and put them in an internment camp. Thousands upon thousands of Asians of Japanese descent. Some of the most loyal Americans you've ever dealt with were interned in internment camps. They didn't go after the Germans in the United States and intern them. There was no camp for Italians. There was no camp for Germans. There was no camp for any of the other European allies. It was just for Axis powers. It was, now there were prisoner of war camps here where they put Germans especially. There was one here about 45 miles from me in Minnesota. But there were no internment camps. We weren't rounding up Germans. And there were first generation Germans here. Like, they had just migrated here from Germany. at the outset of World War II. That was legal. It was completely legal to put the Japanese in internment camps. But it wasn't right. It wasn't right to round up people here legally. Some of them born here. And a lot of people will talk about, the 14th Amendment and the fact that it established this birthright citizenship. We have a debate about that sometime, about what birthright citizenship is. But the reality is that based on the way the courts have interpreted birthright citizenship, which Trump wants to do away with, which it's something that I would be willing to listen to his argumentation for. But birthright citizenship, he wants to do away with it, which I'm like, okay, let's have that conversation. But if you're born here, according to the way the courts have interpreted it, you're an American, right? That's the way the courts have interpreted that clause in the 14th Amendment. But a lot of people who are completely like, the 14th Amendment is law because it's an amendment and it's passed. By the way, it was passed illegally. Let's just throw that out there. The 14th Amendment was passed illegally through force. They forced southern states to sign on to the 14th Amendment through the threat of violence from occupation of military troops. Northern troops in southern states were sent to occupy those states to force the ratification of the 14th Amendment. If the 14th Amendment has been interpreted to mean that if you're born here, you get to stay here, then every single child of every single person who has come to this country illegally and has had a child, every one of those children is an American. According to the courts that you are leaning on for justifying every single act that Donald Trump and others are taking right now. So if the 14th Amendment makes people born here Americans, not just naturalized, but makes them Americans, then why are we sending the children back with the parents who came here illegally? Or if those kids are here and they're legally American citizens because they were born here, then you're deporting Americans. And yes, that's happening. And why isn't there more focus on going after illegal Europeans and illegal Middle Easterners and illegal Israelis? Because there are people here from allied countries that are here illegally. There are Israelis who have overstayed their visas. There are people from Qatar who have overstayed their visas. There are people from the United Arab Emirates. There are people from Saudi Arabia who have overstayed their visas. But we're predominantly rounding up people from Central America and South America. We're not hearing, you're having a hard time finding that they're rounding up people from European countries, which they should be, because there are a lot of illegal Europeans that have overstayed visas, overstayed, their, on passports. Either everybody's subject to that investigation or no one is. If you're going to base it on just what's an illegal look like, then you're going to have to base it on ethnicity. And then you're going to have to admit your ethnicity test is based solely on whether or not that person looks like they are from south of the American border. And by the way, you don't have to go very south of the American border. You can go to places like Mexico. You can go to places like Honduras. You can go to places like Argentina. You can go to places like Colombia. There are many, many, many white folk there. White-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white-skinned, red-haired, green-eyed in those countries. So what does an illegal look like? And do you really believe that just because the courts have said something is perfectly fine, that it makes it okay? Because the courts gave us Dred Scott. The courts gave us orders to northern states to comply with rounding up illegal or runaway slaves. The Fugitive Slave Act. The courts upheld the Fugitive Slave Act. Northern states were forced, people in the North were forced to help round up fugitive slaves and send them back to the South. Now, anybody who's watched this channel enough knows how I feel about the American War for the Second War for American Independence, what you call a civil war. But folks, we are on the cusp of a police state that we are never going to be able to walk back from, and we have been conditioned towards it for over 50 years, but the last 50 years especially they have been walking it up and getting us used to it. And it's time for people to wake up and realize just because the courts say something is okay doesn't make it, or say something's legal doesn't make it right, doesn't make it constitutional. And if you want to lean on judicial supremacy, you've got a problem, because legal scholars, constitutional legal scholars will tell you that the case that developed the theory of judicial supremacy that is now practiced as law, Marbury versus Madison, was a terrible decision by the courts. It established a doctrine that did not exist in the Constitution. Marbury versus Madison established a doctrine that did not exist in the Constitution, that of judicial review and judicial supremacy. The judiciary was meant to be toothless. It created the doctrine of judicial review and supremacy out of whole cloth. And every bad thing that has happened to this country has happened because the courts have said, we get to decide whether or not this is right or wrong. If you want to hear more about that, let me know. Sorry, I don't know what happened to my chat. It disappeared. So I really appreciate everybody tuning in. Go check out my channel. I got a ton of shorts that have just been coming out all week. And go check out my walk and talk from the No Kings protest last Saturday. Had some great conversations there. A lot of the shorts are coming from that. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Michael Gillerin, thank you for the super chat. Mods, channel members, thank you for being here. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Come back and share this, and come back and watch and comment. Tell your friends, hey, look, I'm willing to have this conversation. If you want to come on the show sometime and have a conversation, I'll set it up. We have a conversation live from my studio. You at home, me from my studio, and we'll do that. So until next time, my friends, fight for your freedom. It is yours. Fight for your liberty. It belongs to you. And Sic Semper Tyrannis.